Hey there, welcome. Today we are going to dress a couple of looms. As you can see, I am surrounded by all of my looms here. This one happens to be a 4-shaft table loom. This is the Ashford Brooklyn table loom. And I also have here a little rigid Heddle loom. This is the Schacht Cricket Loom. And I'm going to show you how I would dress these two looms for our winterful weave along that is going to be happening right now. Hi there, thank you so much for being here today. My name is Felicia from SweetGeorgia, and today we're going to talk about warping these looms for the winterful weave along. Now, the winterful weave along is a weave along, as I've mentioned before, where we are going to be weaving together the same project. It is the Kaleidoscope Scarf project, and this is a log cabin motif. This is basically color and weave woven in plain weave. And so because it's woven in plain weave, you can weave it on a rigid Heddle loom. You can also weave it on a multi-shaft loom. And in this case, I am taking this opportunity to use this particular multi-shaft loom. This is the Ashford 4-shaft Brooklyn Table Loom. I think I got this one last summer and I never had a chance to actually film anything with it. I did film a behind the scenes of putting it together, but then I never released it. So as we have mentioned before about the winterful weave along, part of the goal is to be able to weave something with either a multi-shaft loom or a rigid Heddle loom. And from all of the people who have signed up so far for the winterful weave along, I can see that about 60% of everybody is going to be using a rigid Heddle loom, and then everyone else is going to be using a multi-shaft loom. The pattern is written for rigid Heddle weaving, and so we just have to do a little bit of conversion to understand how to get that to work on this multi-shaft loom. But first, I'm going to show you how I would dress the rigid Heddle loom. Now, for the rigid Heddle loom, I'm just going to demonstrate how I would go about warping this loom. I'm not actually going to put the entire project on this loom. I'm just going to show you a few warp ends and see how this all works. I have two colors here. I have this is an undyed superwash worsted yarn, and then I have here also the mohair silk DK yarn. Also, it's kind of like a light worsted as well. And I'm using worsted here just so that you can see the yarns a little bit more clearly on this rigid Heddle loom. I also am using the default reed that came with the loom. This is an 8-dent reed. If you are weaving the Kaleidoscope scarf and you want to use a fingering weight, then our recommendation was a 12-dent reed or a 12.5-dent reed. So this reed being 8 dents is going to be much wider, and if you use a fingering weight with this, it's going to be you're going to make fabric that's way too loose. So just in this case, for this demo, I'm going to use worsted weight and the 8-dent reed. So basically what I'm going to do first is I'm going to attach the loom to the table here with these clamps, and then I'm just going to put the warping peg at a distance away from the back of the loom. Now, if you're doing the pattern, you will need to follow the instructions for how long that warp needs to be, but in this case, I'm just doing a quick little demo so you can see where the warp ends go. So I'm just going to clamp it to the front of the table here. So with my two yarns, you kind of have to decide which one is going to be your pattern color and which one's going to be your border color. I have here a dark and a light color. And so in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to consider my dark color my border color, and the light color is going to be my pattern color. And so that's kind of how I'm going to work here. So what I do is I take my yarn and I'm going to drop it to the floor, and then I tie the end of the yarn to the back rod. And then with my second color, the white color, I'm also going to put that on the floor, and I'll tie my white color to the back rod. So usually when you dress your rigid Heddle loom, you're pulling the yarn through the slots of the reed and then going around the warping peg and then returning back through and then coming out the next slot, okay? So this is usually what's happening. You have one thread coming out of the slot, going around the peg, and then going back into the same slot. You have them paired. And then the idea is that we're going to cut off at the front, and then we're going to move one of these threads to the hole next door. Now, because we're doing log cabin, and log cabin requires us to alternate light and dark colors, or the pattern and border colors, I actually need to just switch now to white. And so I'm going to take my white color or my lighter color, and I'm going to go through the next slot. And so I'm kind of alternating. I have too dark, too light, and now I'm going to have to go and switch back to the dark color. And now I'm going to have to switch back to the light color. So the pattern that we are trying to thread right here has 5 warp ends that are pattern ends, and there's 6 ends that are going to be border ends. And so my border color is the purple, my pattern color is the white. And so my white, I only need 5 ends. I don't need 6. So I have 2 coming out here, another 2 coming out here. I only need 1 of this pair. I don't need 6 of those. So what I need to do is take this white color or my pattern color, and I'm going to tie it off at the warping peg here. Like so. I'm going to cut it off. So what I have threaded here now is 6 of the border warp ends, the darker color, and then I have 5 of the lighter color, the pattern warp ends. And so now I'm going to continue going along and threading for the next unit. So that's 1, 2 of that one. Then I need to tie the white back on. Then go through my 2 dark. Okay, so we are now ready to wind all of this warp onto the back beam here. So I'm going to basically pull it off the peg at the front. And I'm actually going to cut all of my warp open. Like so. I'm holding on to it still. You might have to tie choke ties on here in order to keep it all even and straight. But I'm just going to hold on to it because it's a very, very short little warp here. So now all we have to do is we just have to reslay this reed so that we're going to get the alternating pattern that we're looking for. So with these 2 purple ends, rather than slaying them in the slot and then the hole next door, what I have to do is I have to sort of rearrange all of these colors so that I'm going to alternate between dark, light, dark. So I'm going to have this hole needs to be light. And then the next slot has to be also dark. Okay, so all I'm doing is I'm rearranging the order of where everything is going to be. So I have my light color alternating with my dark border color. All right, so that is the first unit threaded. I have 5 pattern ends and 6 border ends threaded. So that is 1 unit. I'm just going to tie that off so that it doesn't get mixed up. And then looking at the next section. In this next section, I'm going to have to swap things around because this is where the pattern changes for log cabin. So in this next one, I have hole for the border. So I have 2 ends, 2 dark ends right next to each other, one in a slot and one in a hole. And so then the next part is that I'm going to have to move all of the white colors or the light colors to the slots. So I have a slot and a slot here, and then this dark color goes to the hole. So all I'm doing here is moving around the pattern ends and the border ends into the right spots in order so that way it will produce that alternating pattern that we're looking for. Okay, so now I have all my sections threaded. Okay, and then we just tie on to the front rod. So now we're just going to weave a little bit of plain weave to get this started. All right, so we have one loom all dressed and ready just as a demonstration of what it looks like to weave color and weave or log cabin on this rigid Heddle loom. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and dress this 4-shaft loom. I'm standing at the back of the loom. I've put the table loom on my table here, and in order to dress this loom, I normally dress from back to front, which means that I basically put the warp on the back beam first. I wind it all to the back, and then I thread it through the heddles and then through the reed, and then I'll tie it to the front. So back to front, working from back to front. Now, in order to get the warp onto my back beam in a very organized way where I know exactly how wide it's going to be, I am going to use this rattle. Now, a rattle is a very, very simple tool. In the past, I've basically made my own by using a stick of wood and some nails, and you can just nail them in at 1-inch intervals or half-inch intervals, however you want to do it. Now, the reason why I retired my homemade rattle is because having nails sticking out of a piece of wood is not really a safe thing to have around the house when you have little kids. And so I got rid of mine. And instead, this Schacht one is great because it has all the pins already on here. It even has a darker peg marked for the center of the reed here, or center of the rattle. But then it also has this cover on it. So then there's a piece of wood that covers all the top of the pins so that your warp doesn't fall out, but also so that there's no safety concern about hitting these open exposed nails. And this is wide enough to put on a baby wolf. This is wide enough to put on all sorts of different looms. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to clamp it to the back of my loom here. And then I have these ones, these Irwin quick grips. I use them for almost everything. If you don't have anything like this, you could also just tie your rattle to your back beam. You can see that I previously wound all of my warp that's going to go onto this loom. This is the Schacht 4.5 yard warping board. It's very, very convenient. I've just set this up with my alternating light and dark colors for my scarf here. So before I transfer this here, what I normally do is I tie the warp off in a number of places, and then I add some leaf sticks to preserve the cross so I don't lose anything here. So now I have my leaf sticks with my warp hanging out here behind the loom. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop in the right number of ends that I need into each 1-inch section of this rattle. So now that the warp is beamed onto the back beam, now I'm going to cut open the end of my warp and I'm going to start threading all of these heddles, and then I can slay the reed here. So there you have it. We have both of our looms all set up and ready to go. This one is the 4-shaft loom. This one is the rigid Heddle loom. In the next couple of videos, we're going to look at how to join yarns, how to manage color changes at the selvages, and also looking at how to juggle multiple shuttles as you weave. With the joining, we might look at how to splice the weft yarn so that you're going to have less of a noticeable join at the selvages when we change colors. So thanks so much for following along with this. If you would like to join the Weave Along, again, it is open to anyone at any time. You can find us at the Winterful Weave Along on SweetGeorgiaYarns.com. And then you can also find all of the yarns and all the looms, all the tools, everything you need to get started with weaving is all available on our shop at SweetGeorgiaYarns.com as well. That is it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. All right, bye for now.